It was 11 a.m. in the morning. The entire country was under curfew. However, the curfew was said to be relaxed for 2 hours just to satisfy some daily human needs. The internet service in the entire country had been shut down. The Ministry of Telecommunications sector had stated a reason for this down service, but the reason was like a fictional mystery that connects the alien civilization with the pyramids in Egypt. To throw away the boredom created by the curfew and internet blockade, Farhan was playing Monopoly with his 5-year-old sister in the drawing room. The game was playing on an extreme peak of excitement. The endgame was close and both the brother and the sister were highly determined to make the other one lose. This strong rivalry was demonstrating both competence on the surface level and a harmony of love on the deep level. Just when the game was reaching a dramatic end, Farhan's mother shouted, "Farhan, go and buy some fresh vegetables from the nearby market. The curfew has been relaxed. Also, your father is feeling a bit sick, so you have to go." A wave of frustration was floating on every point of their face, but none of them had the ability to disobey that order. Therefore, Farhan left the game and went out for grocery shopping. It was a 5-minute walk to the grocery store, but the 5-minute walk was not appeasing at all because the streets were decorated with military police and other paramilitary groups, including various administrative vehicles, tactical vehicles, and combat vehicles. However, he reached the store and started his shopping. While he was shopping, all of a sudden, he heard the sound of bullet shots and a helicopter flying over the area. As the sound of the helicopter was approaching, the sound of the bullet firing were also intensifying. It seemed like they were executing a big anti-terrorist mission together. Being very confused, he failed to understand what was going on, because according to the law, the curfew is completely relaxed for that time. Hearing that sound, an old man near the checkout counter started talking with the shopkeeper while putting the groceries in his bag. He was saying, "This country has been turned into a living hell by this deadly autocrat. Never in the history of this land any governor had the guts to kill people by shooting from the sky using police helicopters. It's like they are fighting a war against their own nation. Also, Bangladesh police and the other sections of our security forces have been sold and become entirely aggressive and hostile to the public instead of being defensive. Killing humans has become a small act of their professional responsibility." After this, Farhan understood the situation and started questioning the administrative crackdown that is being done to the innocent student protesters. He started to remember various horrific actions throughout the last 16 years that were taken by this autocratic government to hold their power in politics. However, his shopping was complete and the horrible sound of helicopters and bullets were gone, so he started heading back home. Just after getting out from the shop, he saw a man was getting carried to the nearby hospital by 5 others because he was shot in his right shoulder in that helicopter shooting. Sadly, it was not the only case he witnessed. 2 minutes away from his home, he saw another man was shot on his left leg and was carried to the hospital by his terrified and wailing wife. When normal people witness this sort of brutality and blood, they usually give birth to an unknown yet strong type of horror inside their head. Farhan was no different from that. Out of that unknown fear, he paced up his walking and started thinking to inform the other family members of his family about this danger. Exactly 1 meter away from the entrance of his house, when he was thinking, he finally reached home safe and sound. Just when he was thinking to continue the rest of the game with his little sister, out of the blue, he saw his father was coming out of the house in a rush like a maniac. Then he noticed that his father was carrying someone. His mother was also there behind his father. From the color and pattern of the dress, he realized that the person in his father's hand is none other than his little sister. That 5-year-old little girl was shot on her chest. Farhan dropped all the groceries and rushed to his parents. Seeing the blood-clotted sister of his, he occupied himself with heavy thoughts of dark outcomes in future. Since the entire country was under the curfew, the number of vehicles on the streets was very low. This is why they were looking for a vehicle to carry his wounded sister while also heading towards the nearest hospital on foot. However, luck was not with them that day, so they didn't find any vehicle and reached the hospital on foot. After reaching the hospital, doctors took his sister to the operation theater room immediately. Farhan and his parents were waiting outside the OT room. In a question of how this happened, Farhan's mom replied to her son that when the helicopter was passing their house, she was in the washroom and his father was in his bedroom. Like any other normal child in the world, his sister was excited and thrilled by the sound of the helicopter, even though they warned her not to go to the balcony to watch any helicopter because multiple cases of children being shot from police helicopters on the balcony were all over the news. But the absence of parents or guardians around her blossomed various simple and childish desire. The operation didn't take long. The doctor also didn't take long to declare that she was dead. In response to the news of her daughter's death, the mother wailed until the eyes refused to flow any more tears. In response to the news of his daughter's death, the father suppressed all the pain inside his heart until the physical body of his started vomiting. In response to the news of his little sister's death, Farhan cherished all the sweet moments of him with his sister until the raging fire inside his soul prepared him to tear down the tyrants who killed his little sister. In 2024, the month of July was already listed as one of the bloodiest chapters in the history of this nation. This bloodiest history was intentionally created by the narcissistic, egoistic, nihilistic, and selfish dictator named Sheikh Hasina. It wasn't the first devastating bloodshed that was created by this autocratic Sheikh Hasina, since she had brutally killed many people just to accomplish her devilish desires for the last 16 years of her dictatorship. Following her murderous nature, in the July of 2024, Sheikh Hasina, with her militarized political mafia activists and with the help of Bangladesh Defense Force, brutally annihilated more than 1,000 innocent student protesters just because those students protested against a dictator, biased quota systems, and demanded the reformation of that system. During this annihilation of innocent students, many civilians were slaughtered who were not even connected with the protesters at all. Many people like Farhan lost their loved ones. For them, the limit of perseverance got broken. They firmly stood up against these atrocities. This rebellious sentiment was not taken well by the autocratic government, so they started abducting people who led the student protest, arresting people for no reason, checking personal information in the smartphone of passing by civilians, and many more disgusting things. Then came the final day of genocide. It was Sunday, August 4th, 2024. The students, along with a huge number of ordinary civilians, continued their protest, calling for the resignation of the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. From the day when Farhan lost his 5-year-old sister, he was actively participating in the anti-government protest with other students. That Sunday, Farhan joined the protests as well. He was protesting at the science lab area in Dhaka. Two of his best friends were also with him, protesting against the autocratic Prime Minister. They were marching towards the TSC in Dhaka University. From the examples that were set by the Bangladesh Police Commission for the past 2 weeks, it was pretty certain that police were going to shoot them on sight. Hence, the frontline people of the protest were using various types and shapes of simple things as their own bullet-resisting guards, which were made out of wood or hard plastic. While they were marching to the TSC, they took a left turn. Just after taking the turn, they witnessed a huge team of devil-like policemen were already prepared to shoot at them. As a result, they tried to retreat, but it was too late. The police started showering cluster bullets on the protesters like complete maniacs. It was as if those policemen didn't have any heart or soul of their own. It seemed like they lost the ability of thinking rationally and put on a pair of invisible black glasses on their eyes to justify the killing of hundreds of innocents. Within seconds, those weak shields get penetrated by those ravaging bullets and kill at least 20 people in the front line. The rest of them somehow managed to retreat. Farhan also retreated with them. He was finding his two best friends. One of them was found, and then together they started searching for the last one. For more than 6 minutes, they searched for their lost friend, but they didn't find him. The other friend tried to convince Farhan with a deep grief and pain that maybe that lost friend was shot by those devils. But Farhan didn't even want to think that his lost friend was shot by those devils when they were retreating. After preparing their minds to grasp the reality of the situation, Farhan and his friend tried to peek on the streets from where they just retreated. They witnessed a sight of true ferocity and cruelty. They saw those devils joyfully with a big laugh on their face dragging those dead bodies across the streets to put them in a covered van and send them somewhere unknown to vanish the existence of these dead bodies. It didn't take long for them to identify the bloody and motionless body of their friend. That dead body was getting dragged by those devils just like a group of wild hyenas was dragging their everyday lunch. After seeing that sight of disgust, their minds should have been filled up with sadness and despair. But astonishingly, both of them were calm and collected. They expressed heartfelt respect and thanks for the bravery of their lost friend instead of showing any pain and disappointments. In reality, the death of their beloved friend completely washed away all sorts of fear and horror from their heart and soul. It just made them more driven towards achieving their final goal. The protesters started considering marching to TSC with an alternative path. Farhan and his friend got back to join that protest. The protest continued. While they were marching on that alternative path, they saw a great crowd of people rushing towards them. Most of that crowd had a big, long, fat wood stick with them, and some of that crowd even had special firearms. Actually, those people were the political activists of Awami League. That crowd of new devils had only one purpose of rushing towards the anti-government protests. The purpose was to kill and eliminate every last one of them who were protesting against the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. So those new devils started their onslaught. But this time the protesters didn't retreat. Instead, they rushed towards those devils and started throwing big chunks of broken bricks at them. Because the people of this country were completely devastated and discriminated against in their day-to-day lives by those political activists of Awami League. That's why the protesters fought back and made those new devils escape from their path. Then the protesters successfully reached the TSC. This was where the student protesters called out for a long march to Dhaka. Then came the day of victory. It was 5th August. The long march to Dhaka started. This was to besiege the residence of the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This march towards the house of the Prime Minister was to hold her responsible for the actions she took on the student protesters. The nation revolted against the darkness and despair like the same way the hungry tigers revolt in a forest. From all around the corners of Bangladesh, students, teachers, advocates, small businessmen, farmers, industrial workers, and all sorts of other civilians started coming to Dhaka to join the long march towards the residence of the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. It was 11:30 a.m. in the morning when millions of people from various parts of Bangladesh entered the capital Dhaka and started their long march. Under the heavy curfew, people took the streets and started their long march. In various places, they were facing extreme violence from those demonic policemen and political activists. Farhan and his friend joined the long march as well. They were heading towards the residence of Prime Minister. At that moment, a special news was getting reported in various news channels that the Army Chief of Bangladesh military would address the nation on national television. This news was huge since this action of the Army Chief strongly proposed one highly positive scenario to the people of Bangladesh. That positive scenario was the escaping of that barbaric dictator Sheikh Hasina. Around 1 p.m., an unstable video of Sheikh Hasina and her sister was going viral in social media. In that video, they were escaping the country in a military helicopter. After all the mainstream media started telecasting the news that Sheikh Hasina had fled Bangladesh to India with her sister. The joy of victory and happiness of freedom were drifting through the atmosphere of every city and every village of Bangladesh. The protest of hatred turned into a big festival of love and happiness. After hearing this news, Farhan and his friend were so overwhelmed with emotions that tears started coming out from their eyes. Both of them called their parents along with other relatives and started sharing the marvelous news of the second independence of Bangladesh. After the escape of Sheikh Hasina around 2 p.m., millions of people ransacked the residence of the Prime Minister. The flag of Bangladesh was once again waving firmly and very high in the air. The entire nation got saved from a demonic barbarian and began to dream of a better future.